Hi guys, welcome back to the Moringa podcast. This is Kevin Ahere. So last weekend we had the chance to visit the Nairobi Game Jam, which was happening at Nairobi Garage. It was an interesting experience. We got to build a few games and ideate on stuff we want to build in the future. So in connection to that, today we have a special guest lined up for you. His name is Cheruiyot. He's a game developer and also a full stack software engineer. Collins, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm Collins. I'm a full stack developer and also a game developer using Unity, and I have a few games on Google Play. So today I'm here to share my experience on the Kenyan market according to gaming. I'll have to talk about a few things.
Collins, thanks a lot for joining us. So first, I just want to know, when did your interest in gaming first start? Like when you were younger, what games did you really like to play? Like my personal favorite was Tekken 3. Did you ever play Tekken?
Yes, I played Tekken when I was young, but now my favorite used to be NFS Underground, the one where you race with your fellow players. That was my favorite game when I was young.
That's PlayStation 2, right?
Yes, but we also had a cracked version for the PC because that's where it is.
Yeah.
You guys are young. You guys. As we started with like Sega Saturn, and it was my best game was FIFA 94.
FIFA 90. Oh my god.
With Beto and Romario, man.
Wait, I have a question. Was it black and white?
These people from Stone Age.
I actually also played Ending Man. That was the black console with 2 buttons on it and the keyboard and shooting the ducks and all these things. But by then, I think the PlayStation 1 had debuted, I think in 1995.
Yes.
So, Melissa, did you have any favorite games growing up?
Yeah, I really liked Mortal Kombat. I liked all the Bond games.
Yeah.
But I grew up with a lot of brothers, so I think my experience was very gendered. Yeah.
For me, it was Police and Robber. It was not on a console. It was literal people running and kicking each other. Yeah, but when I started, when I got my hands on a console and a controller, I enjoyed NFS, Need for Speed, and FIFA. Today, those are actually the only 2 games I can stand. So yeah. Eugene.
For me, my favorite game was, if anyone remembers, Prince of Persia. The first ones, the 2D ones, the stick figure guy running around, killing people with the sword. And after that, when the games got a bit more advanced, I'd say Assassin's Creed. Yeah, that's my favorite game. Yeah.
And what about mobile for you guys?
For mobile, I don't play mobile games.
Snake.
Melissa? Snake for the Nokia 510.
Snake is still there. For me, I'd say obviously NFS, Taken, another Gran Turismo. There's this one for the Chinese, maybe Tomb Raider, but there was this other one for adventure for Chinese. I can't remember the name, but yeah.
Do you guys remember Game Boy? That was actually my first console. And there was Rayman, Tekken 1 with the PS before it was, people think the first PS is PS1. No. The first PS is PS. Then they did PS1, which was kind of the same, but a very smaller version of it. Then PS2.
PS was the square one, right? Then it was just grey.
Yes, it was just PS. Then it became PS1, and then PS2. So the first PS is not PS1.
You learn new things every day. I didn't know that.
From older people.
Do you guys think that all the characters were very like male oriented? Like it was always, Bond or
it's no joke.
It's Scorpion or like what female games are you guys playing?
Tomb Raider.
Only
Naruto.
Mary-Kate
and Ashley. Mary-Kate and Ashley had a game where you...
Really?
Mary-Kate and Ashley. I can't remember any other female game. All those other ones involved swords and cars, But Mary-Kate and Ashley had a makeup thing. You could buy stuff. the modern one is the Kim Kardashian game. So yeah.
But on the other hand, you can argue it's because it's easier to sell male games. Yeah,
Is
you know.
it? Okay.
Yeah,
No,
I feel it's a thing that you want to feel the action, not to dress something up. No offense to
Yeah,
them.
but there are female characters who are dressed in like Mortal Kombat. I saw yesterday on a feature I saw on YouTube. The females are dressed to please the male. It's like sexualized and stuff like that. So.
But even the male characters aren't dressed to please the male, they're dressed to please the females. They are all buff. So it's either way, because they take the idealism of what we as
Find most
rather the
appealing,
West
yeah.
find as the ideal form of the male form, and then they take what they find the ideal form of the female form. It's both ways.
Yeah. But what do you think about diversity in gaming? So not just a male-female thing, but I would rarely see African or black characters or people with different abilities, right? So you had like superpowers. I remember Borai Cho in, I think, Mortal Kombat. Like, people had interesting superpowers, but I think, are games supposed to be a reflection of society, or they're supposed to be a fantasy? Both,
Yeah,
right?
a bit of both. Yeah.
Because I think sometimes you see, like, most games are also built on, let's say, myths from different cultures and whatnot. So I think this also feeds into the creative aspect of humanity. So if you're inspired by something that is not necessarily real per se, but something from a cultural backdrop that you understand and that you resonate with, and gives you like the drive to create something that reflects your appreciation for this. So you'll have such characters with different powers and such. But also I think games should actually be a reflection of what we experience in reality, or should actually reflect like events that will happen. A good example is like a game like The Last of Us. If you've played it, it's this something about like a post-apocalyptic world. So I think it reflects, for example, the possible scenarios of our world after maybe either an extinction event or adverse climatological events or something of that sort. So it shows how we will deal with such a situation, like, let's say the remnants of civilization after that point in time. Yeah. So it goes both ways. Yeah.
Interesting views from you guys. I've never thought of games as a platform for diversity, but now that you bring it up, I see that it's a valid discussion we need to have. I think the only black character I've seen in a fighting game, a mainstream one, was like a witch doctor character on Street Fighter. Did you guys ever see that?
No.
But Eddie is black.
Yeah.
Jamaican.
Eddie and Mortal Kombat is black.
Brazilian rather,
Taken,
but
Taken,
yeah.
Street Fighter kind of predates Taken.
Yes.
But
By like a lot. Yeah.
let's give our guest a little bit of love. Collins, walk us through how you went from Dangerous Dave to NFS Underground and today building your own games. How was that experience?
My experience with gaming has been quite a journey, because when I first played those games on the first, and when you play a few on the phone as well, my favorite playing on the phone is a game by Pickpock called, I don't remember the name right now, I'll just leave it much later. When you play those games, you realize how much time games take from your daily life, and at least it gives you some escape from the everyday hard work, everyday routines. So my interest started when I first went to university. That was in JKUAT, and that was when I first heard of Unity, the Unity engine that is meant to build games using C#. And after that, I also came across a really good tool called Buildbox, that is a drag and drop sort of engine where you don't need to really code your games, but you just need to drop assets and set the motions, and the gameplay will be built for you. So that was where my first interest in building games. That was where I got my interest in building games. Then with now the vast resources on YouTube, you get to get templates, you get concepts, you get tutorials on how to build games. So the easy ones that you can build, for example, the popular game by Kenyan Kenyan artists, we heard the one called Bungoma Hangman. So it was a really interesting game that many Kenyans could relate with.
Yeah, so for a bit of context, the Bungoma Hangman is a man in Kenya who was so passionately attached to a deceased politician. So he chose to grab onto a chopper that was flying off and hang off it. So Kenyans decided to make a game out of it, and it's actually brilliant. So Victor, can you remember when you were trying to make your first game? What was going through your mind at the time?
Collins. Okay. What was going through my mind when I first created my first game was just a lot. No, the thing is, when you want to build your game, at first you want to build a game, but you don't have all the mechanisms clear. You don't have the design, the game flow, how it should happen, what characters should do, what they should not do, how they will die, how they should revitalize their life and everything. So when you first build your games, you don't have all that in mind. You just want to watch a simple tutorial and build whatever that person in the tutorial is building. That is how you first build your first games. Then now you go and add more functionalities to it. So my first real game from Unity Engine was a plane that was just flying in space. First game. Yeah, just flying in space, doing nothing at all, just a simple control to tilt, to maybe right, maybe left,
To ask you a question, when you're building these complex games where you have a lot of character development and characters, achieving something in life, would it help for you to have a storyteller, someone who actually profession is, telling stories, and someone that can bring that creative aspect to the game?
Yeah, the storytelling part of games is really interesting because when you get to see games fall under two categories mostly. We have the hyper-casual games that are built by companies like Ketchup, Voodoo, and Lion Games. So hyper-casual games are just those games where when you have 10 minutes to waste, you just pick your phone, play it, and those games are really, really addictive. For example, we have one called Rise Up. We had one called Helix Jump. We had those kind of games whereby you don't really need to have a strategy to win, but they're just really addictive. Then now we have other categories of games, the games that require you to have an actual strategy for you to win. So we have games like Clash of Clans, Rise of Kings, and we have even Candy Crush and the Riskins by Candy Crush. Those are games that require you to have a strategy to win. So for such games that require strategy, sometimes you need to have a story to follow along. That is where the user needs to understand what they need to do to win the levels, and what they need to do to get more life, what they need to do to get the best out of the game. So that's when you need sort of a storytelling or a storyline.
And since you're also a full stack web developer, what are the differences or similarities in game design and web design?
I'd say the similarities and differences, it all lies on the engine or the platform you're using. Because when you use a platform like Unity 3D, it's based on C#. And C# is sort of not far from other programming languages. But now there's one called Cocos 2DX. I've not used it so much before, so I don't really understand it so much. So I'd rather talk about Unity. So for Unity, when you understand C# and how everything works, how to have buttons do certain things, it's all not far from web development.
Let me ask, I see many games, and most games are free to download, right? Especially mobile games.
Yes.
How does a game dev, how do you make money from games? What makes money? Do you have to create a bunch of free games and hope one day you'll make one that you can sell maybe to PS or the big game developing companies, or how do you make money from games?
For mobile games, the aspect of monetization is really interesting because first, games need to make you money to support your living, because you find that you spend a lot of time on the games, whether it's improving them, whether it's creating new ideas, whether it's coming up with new strategies or extra levels for the games. You need to get money from that game you're building. So for money, we have three models. We have getting revenue from plain advertising. That is whereby in between levels you can get an advertisement being thrown to the user, and when the user clicks on that advertisement, you get a little bit of some money from that click. Then the model number two we have is called in-app purchases. So in-app purchases is whereby a user has to actually pay real money for a product inside the game, whether they're paying for extra levels or more coins or more ammunition. They actually require money. So that is where Google Play comes in. That when the user wants to purchase something, Google Play will take the transaction, and whether it's their credit card or M-Pesa that gets charged, the money goes to the developer, and a certain portion goes to Google Play. It's at the moment it's at 30%. So it's 30% for both stores, App Store and Google Play. Yeah. And then model number three for revenue making is a combination of both. You can have advertisements and in-app purchases for both. And then we have the fourth version, that is whereby you sell games directly. So when you go to Google Play, sometimes you get that some games are not free. You have to pay for the money upfront. So that is how developers make money.
Okay, a follow-up on that, on the AdSense, right? The ad revenue.
Yeah, advertising.
It's only when a user clicks on the ad. You don't get paid when just showing the ad.
Yes, you don't get paid for just showing an advertisement. A user has to actually convert. So converting means clicking on that advert, visiting that website. Yeah.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So there's normally this habit by people who rely on online advertising to use click farms to generate revenues. So is that a problem when it comes to game developers, in the sense of some people being using unethical means to generate more revenue from their games and such?
Yes, the click farms is a problem in the gaming industry as well, but not directly in our revenue. But when you have people clicking or fake clicking ads inside the game for just to increase their revenue, it becomes a problem to us when we have to advertise our games, because sometimes I need to spend money to advertise my game to give it more exposure. Now, when I'm paying for adverts and someone somewhere is fake clicking them and I have to pay for those clicks, that's where it becomes a problem to me. But Google, I use Google for my advertising, and Google have a good mechanism to cope with the fake clicks, so it's not really a big problem at the moment.
Yes. You've touched on using Google for advertising. Huh?
Yes.
Just walk us through this. Walk us through the procedure of, okay, you've developed your game,
yeah.
Now you want to make money from it. So there's those three ways, right?
Yeah.
So before that, you need people to download your game. So how would you advertise with Google? Open an account, how much is it? And just walk us through how you advertise. And then after advertising, tell us you personally, which mode of revenue generation do you use and why? Because most of the time it's a personal preference, but why? Okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me break it down in terms of when you first build your game, the whole procedure to publishing it to now getting money. So when you've built your game and you've tested everything is working, levels are behaving the way you want them to, now you need to insert adverts inside the game. So for Google, they have for mobile advertising, they have a platform called AdMob. So AdMob is a short for advertising on mobile. Yeah. Now for that, for me I used Unity, and for Unity they have a plugin that you need to install to your game and insert a few lines of code to make your game receive advertisements from Google. So when all that has been configured on AdMob and you've had your advertisement ID set for your game, and you have your game published. So to publish your game, you first need to have a developer account from Google, and for that it's at $25. It's not free, but it's a one-time purchase that is valid for the lifetime of that account. So when you have the developer account, you can publish games. By publishing, it means you're now making the game available to all the users on the Android platform. Now, assuming your game is now live on Google Play, a user can actually download it. And you had configured your advertisements, everything was set, you have tested the advertisements and made sure you're actually calling advertisements. So when a user downloads the game from Google Play and they want to play it, when they are playing it, occasionally your advertisements will be shown in between levels. Now, when a user clicks on that advertisement that is being shown on your game, that is where you get revenue, or you get something small from your game. And also, when I use for my model, I also use in-app purchases, and the market for in-app purchases is not really big on the developing countries. I mostly get users purchasing or users doing the in-app purchases transactions mostly from the top tier countries. That is being United States, Canada, France, Germany, Britain, and all. So that is where the revenue from in-app purchases comes from. And now, coming to your question again, when you want to advertise your game. So when you want to advertise your game, you also need to partner with Google, but you now need to have an AdSense account. So there's a difference between the two. AdMob is for you to get advertisements on your game. That is, advertisements to be shown on your game. But AdSense is for you to advertise your game to the outside world. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to advertise your game, you need to have an account on AdSense. It's free to open it, and then you'll have to deposit some cash that will be used to advertise your game, and then you can set some advertising lines or some call to action words such as, hey, you like such a game, please download it. That could be a call to action button. So that is how you advertise your game to the outside world. And then getting revenue will be using AdMob and the in-app purchases.
Okay, so before getting actually even to the advertising part of the game, I feel like there's one important step I would like to ask you, which is picking the name of the application. Because we all have to admit that at the end of the day, it's the entry point. It's what the users see. So how do you go about picking a name for your application?
Well, that's a really interesting question. Picking the name is part of a process that we call ASO. It stands for App Store Optimization. This is whereby you want to choose a name that stands a better chance at being found out in Google Play. So when you want to have a name for your application, now depending on the type of the game, you need to first understand what are users searching for that is related to your game. So for example, if I have a match 3 kind of game, I know that people on Google Play are searching for Candy Crush, they're searching for maybe Juicy Fruit, such kind of stuff, and they're also searching for maybe something like offline games to play or something like matching games. So when I want to now build my game and name it to be found by those searches, I need to go to the free tools that we have online that give you the traffic score for each keyword. So for that, I usually use a tool called Sensor Tower and Mobile Action. So both give you the traffic score for each keyword. That is roughly how popular that keyword is being searched for on Google Play. So when you have a keyword that has a traffic score of maybe 30% and above, that is a really nice keyword. So for example, if I'm building a game right now, the first keyword that I'd want to have in my name would be something like Match 3 game. Because that is what users are searching for. And then what I also want to have maybe inside the game should be something like Candy, because I know users will be searching for Candy Crush. But since you cannot use that name Candy Crush as it is patented by King, you'll have something like Candy Match 3 game. So when I have an app called Candy Match 3 game, it means it stands a better chance to be found by someone searching for matching games, candy game, and such. Because when you have a name like Candy Match 3 game, it means when a user search for candy game, I'll rank for it. When a user search for match 3 game, I'll search for it. When a user search also for something like games, I'll still rank for that. So that is how you choose your name of your game. Then you also have to optimize your description, and in Google Play we have the short description and the long description. So a short description is almost something like 10 words to convince your user why they should download your game. So for mine, I usually like to remind the user why they need to play my game. So inside my short description, I'll tell them something like, play the best match 3 game now. It's free and fun. So with that sort of sentence, it means you're reminding the user this is a free game, it's also fun, and they need to play it. So it's something like a call to action as well. Then now for your long description, you have a character limit of 4,000 characters on Google Play. That means you have a space of 4,000 characters to play around, get words that you want to target, the keywords. If I'm targeting candy, game, match, free, offline, such kind, it means in these 4,000 characters I'm given, I need to have those words repeating themselves at least 5 times in the description. So when I have those words repeating themselves, and they should occur naturally, because you cannot force a user to, or rather you're not allowed to repeat yourself too much to the point that Google Play will find it as spamming.
They actually have a word for it. I can't remember it, but there is.
So maybe to give you an example of what I do for mine, I'd have in my description something like, start exploring your sweet candy adventure today. Swipe and match yummy candies to create crispy explosions and unwrap cool rewards and boosters. Take on this game and explore thousands of exciting levels with fun boosters, magic candy, and plenty of puzzle games for free to satisfy your sweet tooth in the candy wonderland. That is a starting line for your description that you can use to also remind the user why they need to download your game, and also inside that description, I have my keywords inside, but the user does not need to know that I'm spamming them, because they should appear as naturally as possible.
So another question that I'd like to ask is about your brand name. Yeah. So it comes to a question where, if you feel like you've created enough games, for instance, and on Google products, all of them, almost all of them prefix with Google. You know, there's Google Play, there's Google Music, there's Google everything, Google Maps, Google. Do you feel like that will be an ideal approach for a small game developer? No, maybe not small, but you get the drift, yeah? For someone who is not such as a big commanding influence to prefix with their names. Yes. Given actually, considering the fact that, Paul, you have only, apparently Google Play trims your title at 25 characters. So is that a wise use of, that 25 characters to add your name?
Yes, from what I'm getting is that you're trying to ask whether your name, your publisher name, has some weight on the search terms.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes, it has. It has, I think, a 20% score on weighting. That is, when I search for a game on Google Play, I can either search the game by the name or just by the publisher. For example, right now, if I wanted to search for Candy Crush, I could search for Candy Crush the name, or I could just search for King. And when I look for King, the first result I get on Google Play is Candy Crush Saga. The second one being Candy Crush Soda, and then we have Farm Heroes and Candy Crush Friends Saga. So your name has a 20% weight on the effect of the results that will be returned. So for mine, I called it Lollipop Games Free, because I wanted to also target the keywords Lollipop Games, and I also wanted to target free games, so that way I'll have it in my brand name.
Okay, coming to the next, I was looking at this case study. I have sadly forgotten the name of the application, but once it was an application about books. It was an application that was allowing parents to educate their kids, not parents, application to educate kids via the application. Jesus. Anyway, so they started off with one book, and they would sell it at $1.99, and then
shillings.
dollars.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they added another book, and they charged again $199, and they found that people will just buy one or the other. But then they made a package to buy both books at $299, and they realized that there was 70% of the people that bought one book bought both books combined, meaning that most of the clients that bought all the books were clients that were already existing clients. So after realizing this, they added another 8 books in their line, and they packaged all of them at $9.99. And they realized that of course the number of purchases went down quite considerably, but the number of clients that they already had, I think it was 60% of them, they bought the entire package. Yeah, so it got to a point, and they realized that basically the lesson from this case study was that what you need to care about is your already existing clients for the most part. Yes, you have to focus on new clients, but you need to maintain the ones that you already have existing. So my question would be, in a game like yours, maybe you have a game. Actually, what game do you have?
It's a match 3 kind of game. It's called Lollipop Candy.
Okay, so
check it out on Google Play.
In a game like that, what kind of approach would you use to make sure that you are, increasing, if you need to increase, that is your pricing for in-app purchases and everything? Do you have like a way you will package it or something like that?
Yes, it's really interesting that you came up with the question about increasing prices, because 1 month ago I did changes in the pricing, and it's turned out really well. So first thing first, maybe to clarify on the approach, is that when you're releasing your game, the first maybe 1,000 users you get will be the most valuable users you'll have in your game, because those are the users that will give you the feedback that you have to fine-tune your game before now spending. You don't need to spend so much on advertising when you first launch your game, because your game will always have bugs. Your game will always have something not being in the right place, some experience not being the best. So the best approach is when you first have your first batch of players, take into account their feedback. When you've now fine-tuned your game to fit what the users have been asking for, and still aligned to what you wanted your game to provide, that is when you can now spend on advertising to acquire more users, or rather to get more exposure. Now, coming to the aspect about pricing. Initially, for my game, I had the cheapest in-app purchase was at $1 for some coins, and the most expensive purchase was at $5 for a bigger amount of coins. Now, with that, I used to make a little cash. Not so much, because users will always purchase something like $1, $2, $3. Occasionally, you get a user purchasing something at $5. But now, when you compare similar games on Google Play, their cheapest was at $1, and their most expensive package was at $99. And when you go and see the revenue figures, you'd find that they make in between $20,000 to maybe $200,000 a month from just those sales. So that is when I decided to also do something about the pricing. So I went ahead and edited my prices and the number of coins that you purchase. So at the moment we have the cheapest being 100 coins going for $1. And then we have the most expensive package going for $99, and that for $99 you get 15,000 coins for the game. So an interesting thing is when you set that price, you really think someone maybe might not buy it because they consider expensive, but trust me, they do.
So maybe you can tell us more about your game. So what is it about?
So the game is a match 3 kind of game. That is, you'll be matching maybe 2 or 3 elements inside the game to win, sort of like Candy Crush. Now, for the game itself, maybe to give you a rough figure on the revenues, that the game, users from USA, the top tier countries, they actually purchase things inside the game. So when you're offering quality to the user, they're willing to pay for it. Some have even gone as far as paying up to $40 for just coins. So when a user feels like they're getting the service for what they really need, they'll pay for it.
And how many downloads have you had so far?
At the moment, I'm having 489,000 downloads.
Wow.
Good for
That's
you.
Almost
impressive.
clocking 500,000 soon.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
No, you're on a countdown
Very
now.
encouraging.
And can you say that it's giving you a sustainable amount of income? Can it?
Or is the revenue stream consistent?
Exactly.
Now, the thing with Google Play is that it's really fragile in that they keep updating their policies each time. So, yes, the revenue can be stable. You can make a living out of it. But now, we have so many unforeseen events. Like, today in the morning, I got an email from Google telling me that from August 1st, they'll not be supporting less than 64-bit. So here is an email that I got from Google saying that in our latest blog post, we detail the requirement that apps using native code must provide a 64-bit version in addition to the 32-bit version by August 1st. So from August 1st, they'll not be supporting anything less than 64-bit. So you can see the kind of things you come into when you decide to make a living out of gaming. Last week, I also had a very big drop in the number of downloads per day. I don't understand what happened, but I think it's something to do with a change in the search algorithm by Google Play, and hopefully soon things will be back to normal. But you can really make a living out of games.
It seems that you've done like phenomenally well with your game in terms of downloads. What do you think needs to be done by like Kenyan game developers to achieve that level of success? Are we just doing the ASO and the development wrong, or do you think like there needs to be like some changes in the market to enable them to like make better games?
In order to speaking about the Kenyan games, I've played a few Kenyan games. We had one by my friends in JCOT, a game called Craving Carrots. We also had Bungoma Hangman. I played it for some time. And what is really important for games, that is when you want to get more users and make a living out of games, is that there are a few things you need to understand. One is user retention. That is, your game should be of good quality in that when a user downloads it, they don't uninstall it immediately. You have benchmarks on Google Play that provide you the user retention for 1 day, 7 days, 15 days, and 30 days. We also have something to do with the game size. That is, you need to have a game that is not really too big, in that if I'm a user interested in downloading your game and I find that your game is 1 GB or 200 MB, I'll definitely not download it. But if you have a game something like between 5 MB to 20 MB, I'll definitely download it. So the size matters as well. And another thing is constant updating of the game. Make sure that you take into account the user feedback. If users are complaining about a certain feature being wrong, and most of them, and the complaint is happening frequently, it means you really need to do something with it. And also, so the quality, the user retention, the size of the game, regular updates, I feel that is what is important in order to make a living out of games.
So, my question, it's a bit more, should I say, political, huh? So, basically what I'm asking...
podcast without politics from you.
Okay, because there was this thing, right?
Yeah.
Oh, for those of you who don't know, Kevin is a student of mine, was a student of mine. Huh? Yeah. So there was this thing, right, in my class. So I told them that I don't pirate, right? I don't pirate anything. They kind of laughed at me, and I told them why. The reason I don't pirate anything is this is my industry, right? Yeah. I see developers work hard. Somebody has built that thing which you're gonna get it for free. Somebody's hard and sweat. So I can't pirate. To me, it's like, killing my own industry, right? There's something you've continually said about the Western market. And that's the thing I was telling my class. I was like, build something and ignore the African market, because the African market is not a market. There is no African market. For software, Africans will just take it for free, there is no African market. They're not going to spend on it. So build something, ignore Africa, build it for the West.
Yes.
Okay, if you want to make a success out of any software, build it for the West, ignore Africa. Do you think I was correct in that? Was I just talking?
That is really, really true for software. For software, maybe to give you a small breakdown, in the for my game, I've had like 40,000 users from Kenya, and from those 40,000 users, never ever have I gotten a cent or a purchase from Kenya. But for an equivalent number from countries like Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, I could have maybe 1,000 users. My best example is Norway. I have less than 1,000 users from Norway, but I regularly get someone from Norway purchasing something. US, you don't even have to talk about US. US is the biggest income earner for me, regardless of the number of installs. I could have US coming in at maybe number 5 in terms of total downloads, but the revenue from US could account for maybe 70% of the total revenue in the game. So for an African market, an Indian market, and those developing countries, basically, you don't have to sweat so much to provide services, or rather a game for those countries, while thinking you'll make a lot from it. You just provide for them so that they can be part of the other world playing that game. But for revenue, focus on the
West.
top tier countries.
So building games for Africa is just purely a fairy tale, in your opinion?
No, building games for the African market is just to make them part of the world that is playing that game. Yeah. So no, but the best part about the African countries is that sometimes you get decent revenue from advertising, but from in-app purchases you get zero.
So my question would be, which country surprised you on that list of revenue?
On the list in terms of revenue,
Yeah.
the countries that have really surprised me, one was South Africa. I once said that an in-app purchase from South Africa. I did not expect that one. Then I also had a few in-app purchases from India, and considering India the biggest market for gaming, I was surprised that to have someone really purchase something from India. And then we have the regular countries in terms of revenue earning could be Germany, USA, Canada, France, Australia once in a while. And maybe sometimes you can be surprised by a developing country, someone from a developing country purchasing something, but it rarely happens. I'm yet to get someone from Kenya to actually purchase something.
So in total, you can say like how many countries is your game available?
The game is available on Google Play. It's available to all the countries. The moment I'm not restricting any country because I do not have operational costs such as running servers and all that. Yeah. So for the game, it's just available to everyone.
Have you tried marketing your application in the East, in Chinese and Japan's and Korea's, and probably maybe editing your language to suit those nations?
Or maybe on the thing about App Store optimization again, sometimes you need to change the language inside the game, and even for the description and the name to suit specific languages. But I tried it before and did not have much success. I tried creating versions of the games in Indian, Malaysia, Philippines, and I saw a drop in the install, so I never gave it a second thought, but it should work. So maybe my results were wrong, maybe I did not use the right approach, but for big games like Candy Crush, Clash of Clans, when you actually visit their game page from other countries, you'll find that the version of that game available for that country has been translated. So it's something you should look into. But since I'm a small developer, those are other costs that you really need to pay someone to do, which I'm avoiding at the moment.
And in terms of game development, you do a bit of Swift and Android, right?
No, I was learning Swift.
You are learning Swift.
Yeah, but your point is, you see, when you use an engine like Unity, it's a cross-platform engine. So it means you can port to any platform. So at the moment, I've only had the Google Play version. But if I ported it to iOS, but the cost for acquiring an account for iOS development is at $100. So at the moment, maybe in future, not at the moment.
Oh, and final question from me will be about putting a game under a company like Voodoo. I know it's a big company and it would take quite a phenomenal application to get an invite from those people. So what are your thoughts about people who do that, and do you think it's a valid approach towards making a hit application in the industry?
Maybe to surprise you, it's not that hard to get an offer. I actually got an offer from a studio called Lion Games. They wanted me to list my game as one of theirs, and then we could do a revenue sharing kind of model. What I'd advise someone is, if for a game that is not complete, you're still testing on a lot of features, and you don't need to partner with them that early. And also, publishers like Voodoo and Ketchup, they have a specific niche. They focus on hyper-casual games. So since mine is not a hyper-casual game, it would not suit their portfolio so much. But the offers they give you, sometimes you need to consult a lawyer so that you can get a deep understanding of their contracts and their model and the revenue sharing kind of thing. Because sometimes it has happened before with a game like Color Switch. Color Switch was a really big game in 2017. It was published under, I've forgotten the publisher name, but it was published under a publisher. And sometime in 2018, the publisher and the game developer got into, I think, fallout. And now the game had to be pulled down. So as you can see, someone depending on that game for their livelihood, and then the game is being pulled down because of a few issues between the publisher and the developer. So you can see it's a really risky thing. You need to consult maybe your lawyers, get an understanding of the contract that you're getting, and make sure that it's your decision that you're giving it to them, but not them acquiring your game without you being sure of it.
But in terms of, assuming this is a perfect world and the legal systems go perfectly and you are comfortable with the contract,
yes,
would you consider it a viable risk in terms of owning a share of a very big application? We had this discussion in our previous podcast about funding, where we were talking about ownership and whether people should consider owning a small part of a very big thing or a whole part of something small. Would you consider this to be one of those situations?
Yes. Maybe in an ideal world, that deal would be really nice. If I could get an email, I got an email from the Lion Game Studio. They were telling me about partnering with me for the game, and then they basically when they would acquire my game, they'd give me funding for up to $10,000 to market the game. So as you can see, that is really good money for marketing alone. And when you partner with such publishers, it means your game would go to installs such as 10 million, 50 million and such. So such numbers translate to really, really decent revenue, life-changing revenue. So in an ideal world, publishers,
it's a deal
the
to
best
take.
deal, yeah. But now, since it's not always that way, sometimes you need to
it's not an ideal world,
yeah,
so we don't think about ideal situations.
Normally, what is the conventional revenue split, or is it a situation whereby you as the game creator license the game to the company, then you get like a margin as royalties consistently over a certain period of time, or is it like an agreed revenue split, this like a 40-60 split or something of that sort? How does it work?
It works with the 40-60, 70-30, depending on how much you want to share, or how much the game was good, how much the game is bringing in. Because if I have a game that is really bringing in good money, I'd want to do something like 70-30. Me retaining the 70% and them having the 30%. But it also works similar to Google Play in that any revenue from Google Play, it's at a 70-30 split sharing model. So it also works that way for publishers. But now, From what I've gone through, from blog posts and developers telling their stories about what happened when they got into a publishing deal, is that it's the publisher that handles all your revenue, and then they'll now give you your 70% share. So that's not what always happens. Sometimes you get a publisher that throws you under the bus, and all your money goes that way.
So transparency and accountability are an issue sometimes.
Sometimes I feel like you should not give them all the access to your game. I feel it's better when they only deal with the marketing part of the games, and then you'll deal with the revenue side of things, or rather you can hire someone from finance to do the revenue thing and the splitting, so that you only focus on improving the game while they focus on marketing it, and then someone else does the finances.
And to ask, right?
Yeah.
Why would one, for example, maybe because I have zero, downloads of a game I've never created, but someone like you, to me, you're like huge. You have 400,000 downloads. You
almost 500,000.
Yes, almost 500,000, and that's huge for me. Why would you want to get to a publisher rather than continue to build games under your own name and build yourself up to the point that you become a publisher, and in turn, start publishing games from your fellow people in your market, for example, in Kenya, who are coming in, and then now you publish for them, and you have the muscle and the capacity to grow them. Why not grow yourself?
When you think of a publisher as someone who will give you more exposure and more legitimacy in the business, that way you'll have to take their deals. Because for someone like me, my game is more than a year old, and it just crossed 489,000 downloads just recently. And under a publisher, we'd be talking of numbers like 5 million downloads per month. So when you say a publisher is a really good deal in terms of numbers, that translates to revenue and legitimacy and a big name out there.
So I think, does it affect the quality of advertising that will come through publishers, and so that they increase your CPCs and everything? I remember like this one time I was doing YouTube. When once back in the day I was a YouTuber, and I joined this publisher called Full Screen Publishers, and the thing they used to do, they would promise that they would give you a CPC of 5. Of course, they never delivered, but at least is there such a situation in the gaming industry where publishers promise better rates for advertising and everything?
The kind of deals you get from the kind of emails I get from advertising companies is different. For a publisher, they'll only deal with giving me more exposure or taking my game under their wing so that the game grows, becomes bigger, but they do not deal with the revenue, the amount of money I get from advertising in any way, because to them I only get downloads from them. But sometimes you get emails from other advertising companies, asking me to maybe try out their SDK, promising me of really good money, up to maybe $5 per 1,000 impressions. Impressions is when an advertisement is shown. So I've gotten a few emails before. Let me just look for one really quick, whereby they tell you to try out their platform. They guarantee you really crazy money. At the moment, since I've partnered with Google, their average CPM cost per mile is $1 to $2 when it goes on the higher side. But when you get emails from other advertising companies, such as, let me just look for one. Here, there's one telling me asking me to try out their platform, telling me that they would give me an eCPM of up to $25 per 1,000 impressions. Damn. So as you can see, it's really good money that they promise you, but since it's a new platform, new SDKs to integrate, sometimes I don't think it's worth it, because with Google, it's guaranteed they'll pay you, they'll never delay with your money. And with Google, advertisements are available for every region in the world. So it means when you get a player from India, when you get a player from the Antarctica, they'll always
get an advertisement.
But with the new advertisement companies, sometimes they would not serve advertisements in certain regions.
All right. So going to outside of your application and everything, and back into the bigger scope, which is the gaming industry, what sort of gaming trends are you seeing in taking steam? Yeah, gaining more steam in 2019.
I'd say the hyper casual games that is really peaking at the moment. It started at some time in 2017. That is what the gaming industry is tending to lean towards, because when you have a game like Color Switch, when you have a game like Rise Up, Helix Jump, it's a really sticky game in that you just need to play for a minute to get addicted to it. So users would prefer such hyper casual games because you do not need to think so much about it. It's addictive. It's small in size compared to the strategy games, and also they come out often because hyper casual games, I think each month there is a game trending. But for games, strategy games like Candy Crush, Candy Crush has been around for almost 7 years now. So you can imagine someone playing your game for 7 years compared to someone playing a new game each month. That is really interesting and addicting. So the new trend is maybe hyper casual games.
All right. Any other questions from any one of you guys?
I had a question about how you target the users for your games. Do you sometimes, I've seen stories about developers trying to make the games as attractive as possible to children, who can sometimes maybe make like accidental transactions and stuff like that. So how do you think we can exploit this to the maximum? And if your parents like some members of the panel today, like how do you safeguard against these accidental transactions?
That is really interesting because when you target kids sometimes do crazy transactions. A kid can make a purchase for up to $100 inside the game because they were enjoying the game. But it's not a good approach because if a transaction was made accidentally, the parent has a space of 7 days to request for a refund. So if they request for a refund, Google Play will definitely give them their cash back. So on your side, you not get any revenue. Then also, for games targeting kids and families, I think from 9 and below, you have to request for special certification. So in order to have your game recommended under the kids section, it means Google will have to check for things like accidental clicks on the advertisements are not available. Accidental purchases by kids is not done. And also when you log into the Google Play application itself, you have a tab. When you just go to the settings, you have a tab telling you about payment methods and authorizing each transaction. So you can have a PIN so that a child does not accidentally make a purchase. Yeah. So advice is that if you want to target kids and families, just follow the right policies required by Google in that do not push for accidental clicks and purchases, because that way your account will be suspended.
One thing about I would call you an entrepreneur because of a game, it's yours, you've built, and you're. One thing about it we've had, right? It's great patience and determination and not giving up, right?
Yeah.
Which, isn't the story we get told most of the time. We always think of the people who've made it one-hit wonders. We don't know that Amazon has been there for years. It started by just first selling books. We just know Amazon now. But interesting you say that your game has been for over a year. Because immediately you said you have 500,000, you're hitting north of 500,000 downloads. But all this time we've been talking, in my head, your game, is a few months old. I naturally did not think that you... So give us the journey, like you first uploaded and then, you get like one download a month and then,
Okay, maybe to break it down to you, every developer out there, building the game is not the hardest part. Marketing it is 10 times the challenge. When for a developer, you just think when your game is ready, you publish it to Google Play and you just wait for the millions. Sadly, that's not what happens. Maybe to quote people like Rovio, the makers of Angry Birds. They tried 52 times. On the 53rd attempt is when they hit success. So you can really see how much work you need and sometimes a bit of luck for your game to be a hit. Mine, when I first published it, I also hoped I'd make instant millions, but that was not the case. In my first month, I had to do some advertising, and for my first month, I had 1,166 downloads. That is with a lot of emailing, asking people to download my app, a lot of Facebook bothering people, a lot of posting on WhatsApp, groups, Telegram, all those platforms, bugging people, asking them to go check out my game. And with only that, it only managed to get 1166 downloads. So you can see it's really hard. Now, after that is when I realized I need to be serious with marketing, so I need to come up with a strategy that could be sustainable. Because when you think of Google Play, advertising with Google, it's really expensive because to get an install costs something like between 10 shillings to sometimes even 200 shillings, depending on the country. To acquire a user from the United States would cost you even up to $10. Whereas acquiring someone from maybe India, Kenya, Africa would cost you something like 10 shillings. So with advertising, you don't just jump into it because it will cost you and it's not sustainable. So before advertising, I went and researched on what other people have done, and I realized that is when I needed to optimize my game, the description, the icons, make it as eye-catching as possible for the most conversions. Because you want, when a user visits your game page, the chances of them downloading the game is really high. That is achieved through a really good call to action, a really good icon. You want, when a user searches for a game and yours happens to be in the search results, your icon is eye-catching enough to make the user click on your icon. And when they now visit your page, your short description, your screenshots, your game trailer is really good to make them convert. By convert, meaning download your game. So after optimizing all that, it took me around 6 months to have the game looking what it looks like on the Play Store at the moment. When everything has been optimized, though optimizing is something that you keep doing and doing. So at the moment, I feel I'm comfortable with the numbers, but it's something you need to keep up improving it. So when the game had been optimized now, that is when I now tried out paid advertising. So with paid advertising, after doing all the redesign of the graphic assets, the cost to acquire a user went down to up to 2 shillings per user. So that is you can see the difference.
2 shillings per user.
To acquire a user, mostly from the third world countries and second world countries. But a user from US, I can acquire them at around 30 shillings, which is really, really cheap compared to getting them at cost like $10. And considering a user from United States has a higher chance of spending inside the game,
it's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it. But what I'd say is, for users, for game developers out there, focus on optimizing your game. Make sure when a user visits your game, they'd really love or they'd really want to download the game instantly. Because making the game, yes, it's hard, but advertising the game, or rather getting exposure, is the hardest part. Yeah.
And in terms of collaboration, how do you think game designers can partner best with creative directors or graphic designers, product designers, to design better games? Because maybe it's not a one-person journey or experience. Do you think there's enough collaboration happening in Africa or in Kenya? And what can we do to foster better collaboration?
Maybe for Kenya. The gaming industry is not really big in Kenya at the moment. What I can give is the procedure of making a game. Sometimes when you first need to have a really fast prototype. So you just need to get a game, draw some chart flows of how things will happen inside the game, what the user does, what the user does not do to win, and the game flow basically. So when you have that game flow drawn, that is when you translate it to the code version, or rather the game itself inside a platform like Unity. Now, with that game, when you first build your beta release, you can test it now. You can give it to the family and friends to play it and give you some feedback. So if the core functionality or the core product you have is really interesting, so it means it's something that could work out there. So after getting the feedback from users telling you your game is interesting and nice, that's when you now need to have graphic designers, animators, all those designers, everyone, to do for you quality game assets. That is, you have things like the splash screen should be really beautiful, backgrounds, assets, textures, environments, all that should be done by a professional. Because when you do it on your own, trust me, you cannot be good at everything. You'll do some substandard work. But for now it's really cheap, because when you have platforms like Graphic River, for Graphic River you get free game, not free, paid for game assets, but that are really good quality. So when you want to build a game at the moment, you don't have to focus on maybe creating textures and all, because Graphic River has that for you. You just need to go and purchase graphic assets that are in tune to the theme of the game you're building. You have resources like Fiverr, where you can get really cheap designers. You can get also cheap animators for your videos, for your promo videos. You can also get icon designers. You can also get people that will optimize the description and all that for a really cheap fee compared to doing it on your own. So maybe my advice to my fellow Kenyans is that focus on the quality. You can always get cheaper and better services online rather than paying for it really expensive. Yeah.
So, permit me to ask, how long did it take you to create your game, from saying that you want to create your game till finally publishing it? Huh? Not the beta version, the actual version.
The final version, you cannot say when it was completed, because each time you'll be updating. But maybe the first copy that could actually be playable was done in around 4 months, sort of.
From conception to building.
Yeah,
to
from
deployment.
conception to the first release on Google Play. That is with thousands of videos being watched, thousands of debugging tutorials online and all. But my advice to someone trying or venturing into gaming for the first time, they should check out this software called Buildbox. It's really simple. In maybe 1 week you can understand its interface, and within 2 weeks you'll be building really nice game, the hyper casual games, because you just need to have the graphic assets ready and the game flow in your mind of how you want things to happen, and then they'll give you preset templates that you can work with to have your fast and really quick version of the game.
And it's like Unity, it's cross-platform.
Yes, and the good thing is it's cross-platform. So, and just like Unity, you have to you can build the APK from Buildbox, or you can also export it to Android Studio and add a few features. Yeah.
So a question I have is, are there any barriers to entry that you encountered when you decided to venture into gaming?
Yes, a lot of barriers actually, but most of them I met them during the marketing side of things, because you realize when in Google Play, when you release a new game on Google Play, developers are given, new games are given a promotional period of 30 days. In that, within the first 30 days of you publishing your game, Google will sort of give you a first priority to be discovered. Now, when that period has gone, your downloads, everything plummets to the floor, in that you'll never be discovered. So that was my first surprise.
To go.
After the 30 days, Google no longer push for your game in the top new free games. So without any advertising, without good marketing strategies, without optimizing your page, everything drops. That is my first challenge. So the hardest part has always been getting more exposure, because sometimes you need to pay for it. Sometimes paying for it does not work because you get users that are not well engaged. By engaged, I mean when you get a user, you should get a user that plays your game. And while playing your game, that is when they can make purchases. So sometimes you spend a good money on getting users that don't even play your game that much. So that the challenging part is always getting users.
Okay, so Collins, you learned how to develop games yourself. So you would say that you're self-taught.
Yeah.
Some people learn differently, and sometimes some people may not have the privilege of learning by themselves on YouTube or having access to equipment. So just as a note, I guess, to curriculum designers in Kenya or in Africa, what would you say is lacking or needs to be done more of in terms of the education space and teaching young people or students how to design games?
To give what I wish would have happened for me, according to how I learned developing games, is if back then I knew that there are awesome and cheap courses from platforms like Udemy that go for as cheap as $10 to learn the whole almost 2,000 hours or something close to that, to understand fully how games work, how to build one of your own, how to even conceptualize a game. That would have been something that would have made me build my games much, much faster. So a piece of advice I'd give to everyone, especially to the parents, if you know your kid is interested in games and building games of their own, take the initiative and purchase for them these really cheap courses. They go for $10. $10 from learning C# to actually working with Unity 3D to even building your first games, debugging your game. Just pay for them. You never know, they might need it. And for guys in university, guys outside of finished school and interested in gaming or learning gaming, just come together as friends, or your friends. Just ask someone to pay for you. They're really cheap, and that's the most efficient way, because when you rely on a place like YouTube, sometimes you might be following someone's playlist, and all along the way they drop or they stop producing those videos. It does not mean that you stop your game development. But since we have platforms like Udemy, you have even Unity, they have the official tutorials. Just work with that. I feel it will be much faster to learn gaming that way.
Collins, if someone has questions on building a successful game or just to do with applications development, where exactly can they reach you?
I would not call mine as successful at the moment. I still need a lot of downloads.
Of course.
But if you want to reach me, I'm on Twitter at Cheruiyot. I'm on Instagram with the same name. I'm on Quora under the same name. You can just find.
You can link them below the podcast.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll leave a link to my Twitter username below.
Yeah.
You can ask me questions about getting users. You can ask me questions about finding quality users.
At a fee?
The best ways, no, for free. I'll offer this one for free. Finding users, App Store optimization, a little bit about design, places you can get really cheap resources for your games. I can even give you my access to the gaming resources that I've used along the way, how to think about the game, how to compare with your competitors, how you can borrow ideas, the best ways you can implement features, what users are asking for. You can always ask me about that. I'll leave my Twitter username below.
All right. For the record, for those of you who are interested in development and finding further information on how you can promote your application, easy sources on how you can develop Android apps and even iOS apps, there's this really, really good podcast that will be linked in the description. Yeah, and you can listen to this guy. He talks about various marketing ways for gaining publicity for your podcast. It's a specific game development podcast, which name I can't seem to find. And I'll link it to the description. I can't find the name yet, so yeah, it will be there. It's a really good podcast. I've been listening to it in preparation for this podcast, and it's a good one.
Maybe to tell the guys on what I feel guys should also learn or venture into is the VR and AR space at the moment. It's still new, so it means the gold rush is still there. If you learn VR and AR and learn to incorporate it in your games, it will be a big hit in the future. It's what I'm learning also at the moment. So guys can also try that.
So guys, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. We look forward to your feedback and any questions you may have. Have an amazing week. See you next time.